Let's go ahead and get into it. Nice art as well. Where Mad Gods Dance by ButcherExMachina, which is a great name. It was a quiet, fog-covered day, one crept by the rot of autumn, one from an age past, one forgotten, one where mankind was but another species, not dominant, where beasts lurked in the early light of day, not scattered and burnt in mere shadows, where men were barely scraping by from each threat of death. The Middle Ages. Noxious diseases, ravenous animals, and destructive warfare were all common fates that ravaged the course of man's collective machine. Yet war dominated the others in scope. War seemed to have a stronghold on all, especially for those of religion. Of all the things man went to war over, the call of God was most faithful to attract them. Yet what did their religion bring? Horror? Authority? Guilt? To Albin, it was all it brought. In fact, it was why he avoided such things. He found himself far from his religious homeland. The Holy Roman Empire is what people called it. Men would rave of its greatness, preaching of its beauty, its glory. Yet, Albin didn't care for it. Instead, he rode on horseback right then, following the fellow men of his mercenary band. He wasn't an ornate man. He wore simple chainmail, covered by broader plates of armor, a sheathed blade at his side with a shield displaying a woman, a sword plunged through her abdomen and poking out through their back. Albin looked ahead, seeing the backs of his fellow mercenaries and their horses. He grunted in a sort of quiet frustration. They'd been traveling for a week straight per the orders of their captain, Finn. He told them of a small town located near the border between Franks and the Holy Roman Empire. Supposedly the people were all of noble blood, and may pay a pretty price for work. Whether Captain had heard this info was up for debate. Either he'd heard it uttered by the drunken breath of a merchant, the shady lips of a vagabond, or the weak words of an opportunist bandit masquerading as a feeble man. Either way, Albin couldn't help but feel a silent anger. It'll all be worth it, he told himself. You got enough money to drink for weeks, enough to court women for a night's rest, enough to maybe leave this life for another. But then again, this word was of high debate to himself. He wasn't even sure if some of those things were what he wanted. Maybe they were. Maybe he'd convince himself it was eventually. His thoughts came to a standstill, however, as he watched Finn raise a hand, a motion to stop. He tugged the reins of his horse and felt himself come to a standstill. He looked forward with the group, waiting to see what the issue was. It wasn't long before Finn bellowed out, "Hold thy reins, men. There's a blockage in the road, up ahead." Albin turned, kicked his feet to his right, and hopped off his horse's saddle. He walked forward, attempting to come and see what the cause of the stop was. Great, he thought. Just a fallen oak or branch. That exhaustion and selfish desire within his soul made him seethe silently as he came upon the sight of his captain and the rest of his company. Most of them looked the same, clad in the same conforming armor and mail, carrying shields with their crest upon their backs. All of them except for Finn. He was cladded in an ornate plate with gold trimmings. A fanciful helmet was placed upon his head, one that displayed the face of a stag on its visor. He had a sheathed blade at his side and a decorated shield upon his back. He looked at his men and pointed at the object blocking their path. It made Albin freeze up a bit. It was no tree. In fact, it was too stony to even be considered one. It was what looked like an obelisk, one the size of a large carriage made of grey stone, that now laid split across their path like a bisected carcass from its lower half. What could have done that captain, a scrawny man? Augustus asked. Augustus, are you going to take that? He called you scrawny, dude. A large beast, no less, Finn responded. I say we try to move it. With our combined force, it'd be no different from a pebble. I'm not sure, Captain, said Bjorn. I don't know how to pronounce that name. A large man with enough muscle to crack a skull. Looks a little too big. Oh, now, Bjorn, don't feel discouraged. Have a little faith. If we push enough, it'll be but a mere intrusion. And if we can't? Albin asked. We will course correct. Just head down east of here. Surely we will find our salvation. Another path, perhaps. Albin looked a bit closer at the obelisk. It was fairly aged, cracks strewn the length of its body, and Mother Earth seemed to be claiming it once again. It's odd, Albin said. He nudged Augustus's shoulder. What? He asked. See around the obelisk? Looks aged, doesn't it? Augustus kneeled down and took a close look, motioning for the rest of the group to do the same. It was the fifth man along them to speak first, Gunther, a man who could drink a keg of alcohol like it was nothing. He's right, Captain. Looks old. You sure this isn't some sort of setup? Finn narrowed his eyes and looked off into the distance as if to think. I'm most certain that the merchant was telling the truth. His voice was hesitant. Albin sighed. Finn was a trusting man. Too much of one, in fact. It made him susceptible to a lot of trickery. Such was the case for his noble blood. And if he wasn't? Augustus asked. Even in myths, there's an origin point, my friend. There has to be some sort of crumb of truth to it. A source to base it off, yes. He's right, Captain. Looks old. You sure this isn't some sort of setup? Finn narrowed his eyes and looked off into the distance, as if to think. I'm most certain that the merchant was telling the truth. His voice was hesitant, Albin sighed. Finn was a trusting man. Too much of one, in fact. It made him susceptible to a lot of trickery. Such was the case for his noble blood. And if he wasn't? Augustus asked. Even in myths, there's an origin point, my friend. There has to be some sort of crumb of truth to it. A source to base it off, yes? There was a palpable silence till Albin interjected. He's not wrong. There's more behind a mask of deceit. Whether that be the bones of lies or the flesh of truth. Whatever the case, we should tread carefully. Never know what will burst out of this fog. Best not to gamble, Augustus said. I suppose you're right. Come, men, we'll make for the east, said Finn. He walked back to his stallion, silently indicating for the others to do the same. Albin started to make his way back to his mount, but soon found himself walking near Augustus as he did so. So what do you think? He asked. We're heading into a trap, Augustus said flatly. And you'd know, you snake, Albin teased. It's fairly common trickery to know. Stop a carriage or a caravan in its tracks, loot and murder them, maybe take or eat the horse, steal the jewels and supplies under rotting noses. Where was the last night during cards? I thought you always pulled something. Maybe I did. You just didn't see it. A sly grin spread across Augustus's face, and Albin couldn't help but chuckle a bit. Let's just hope we can finally stop. I'm sick of horseback. Depends. If this goes where I think it will, we're likely to be gutted and thieved. If not, we find a cushy brothel with rich men left and right to gamble with. I suppose. Albin finally reached his horse and mounted himself upon its saddle, grabbing the reins and tugging on them. His horse began to move with the rest of the group and into the mist. It was a loud place, that church was. Men, women, and children congregated to serve in the house of the Lord. Some locals, others faraway travelers in need of guidance. The church was simple, one made of wood, most likely as a means of saving resources. Its spires stretched high into the Roman sky and pierced it like a blade. It was surrounded by a few homes in the dense woods. A young man looked on at the house of God that sat before him. He felt unworthy, as if he'd be a heretic to even try and step in it. The burning pain on his back had yet to cease, and he gritted his teeth. It was a reminder of his sin. If it was just the state the wild had left him, it would be unwarranted. The bruises, cuts, and cracked lips were all undeserved. Yet it was the pain that made it all seem deserved. Just try, he thought to himself. No one knows you here. It's a fresh start. A fresh congregation. He let the words echo throughout his skull, bouncing back and forth. He sucked in a bit of breath and braced himself, walking forward toward the congregation. He felt the grass between his toes. How cold it was in this day. With each step, he felt his heart beating faster and faster. I'm unworthy, he thought, a heretic swathed in desire. He pushed down his fear, trekking his way toward the door where the priest stood. A snake amongst the garden of his children. The priest's face at first was one of welcoming, then of concern. The man froze up, unable to move. He couldn't do it. It was too much. Art thou all right? Thy complexion is pale. The priest's voice was soft. The man looked at him. Yes, I'm sorry, it's been a long time since I've stepped within such grounds. The priest cocked his head at the man and stretched out a hand to him. Come, dear brother, the Father shall forgive thy transgression. He is merciful, as am I. The man looked at his hand and up at him. He took a deep breath and took it. Call me Father Ab, the priest said. And thy name? The man bit his lips, so hard he could taste blood on their cracked surface. Just call me sir, he said. Father Ab nodded, and with the man's hand, led him into the chapel, a thing he'd not seen since his exile. They made camp by the time the night had begun to set in. The sky shined with a million eyes that darted about and watched the group as they gave rest for the night. Albin stared up at them, looking to them for guidance in a way. He always found himself thinking they were the million eyes of God that watched humanity's every move, judging their actions and how they went about their lives. He wondered if God approved of him and his life up to this moment. He looked from the sky to the rest of the group, all of them, including their mounts, around a central light of warmth and refuge within their ever-present dark. The mares stood about, drinking from a bucket that Gunther had filled with water for them, a request met with a bit of grumbling from the man, for he was far from this kind of drink. As for their seating, it was cut down by courtesy of Jorn. The wisps of flame danced about the air, sending a faint yet noticeable scent of burning that both warmed and scorched Albin's lungs. It gave him comfort, yet it bit like a snake within Eden. Finn and Jorn sat about together, talking and joking as they peeled about their rations, roasting them over the open flame. It filled the air with a fine scent of slow, burning rabbits and various birds they shot out of the sky. It tantalized Albin's lips, yet he didn't take it in. He couldn't. He may have been one of them, yet he felt as if a fifth horseman alongside four. Then there was Gunther. He sat, staring into the acrid flames of the campfire, seemingly displeased and bored. He could tell why, in a sort of way. After all, he gave the sweet taste of warm foam off the brim of a mug. But he'd see flashes about his expression, ones he couldn't discern. Possibly hurt, maybe anguish. In a way, he could relate. Yet he dared not divulge such things. It hurt too much to do so. And with a million eyes in the sky, he bit his tongue. I deserved it, he thought to himself, then turned to Augustus. I'm gonna stop for just a second and just say one thing for you, Plague, is when you're doing thoughts, and this literally does not affect the reading at all. The story is freaking amazing. I'm loving the atmosphere so much right now, and I'm sensing a little bit of foreshadowing, and so it's great. And this does not affect my reading whatsoever. But just technically, when you're writing thoughts, we don't need the quotation marks. You can just italicize it. And then the other thing is in your dialogue, if there's like a mid quotation dialogue tag, if this is, so like if it was, I deserved it, he thought to himself, and then he said something else. If this was a full sentence, this would be a period. And if this is a fragment, this would be a comma. There is a time up here where, and it's been like a few times, and it does not bother me at all. The only reason I'm even saying anything is because, like, if you were like sending this to an editor, they might point something like that out. But as far as just telling a good story, it does not matter. And this is awesome. I deserved it, he thought to himself. Then he turned to Augustus. He sat near Albin, seemingly in his own world, sketching with a small book that Albin had never seen the contents of. He had a vial of ink at his side with a quill Albin assumed as he journaled with. Yet he wondered what there was to even catalog. Leaving? He smiled a bit at that, yet hid it out of fear of something strange. In a way, he felt he did it so as not to embarrass himself in front of such a companion. He considered his word of value and his looks on his looks, one of a He stopped with those thoughts and looked toward the sky. He would not give in to such a sin, not again, not under the eyes of God, not under his gaze. So he resigned himself to mundanity, not giving in to conversation, only giving responses and comments when Jorn and Finn's stories extended outside their one-on-one nature. Yet, he felt watched as he sat, not by God, not by his gaze. Nay, he turned his attention from the group and the flame they gathered about and looked out into the nocturnal gloom. Within it, he could have sworn he saw a shape moving about, seemingly scuttling from tree to tree to examine the crowd. A beast? He turned to the group. I just saw something out in the dark, Albin said. The group turned their attention to him in a sort of collective silence. His comment was blunt, matter of fact, without any sort of question. Jorn then stood and grabbed his sheath blade. Where? Albin pointed out from where he'd looked before, out toward a distant tree line. Yet it had gone from view. Jorn looked out, trying to cut his gaze through the dark to possibly see just a flicker. Anything. But there was nothing. Must have been a trick of the eyes, Jorn said. I appreciate the caution, holy man. Thanks, Albin mumbled. Yet as he looked back, the figure appeared again. He could bring himself to say anything again. It would only end up disappearing again. So he resigned himself to the group as Gunther began to speak. You know, I've heard tales of monsters in the dark at brothels and taverns. Lots of variation at them places, let me tell you, Gunther said. A lot of them are true, Jorn said coldly. I'd say some are. Others sound like donkey shit to me. Please, I'd know, drunkard. In fact, a lot of beasts lurk just out of view, just out of sight enough as not to draw attention from prey. Then enlighten me, brute. Gunther crossed his arms and gave an exaggerated huff of air that made Finn chuckle. I know many. One I can regale you with is Draugr. What? Gunther looked confused. A Draugr. They're men. Men without a good soul behind their sockets. They lurk about in torn clothing or naked, their bodies rotted and fly meal for any preying insects that dare to infest their many wounds. They can do a lot of things. Sometimes they're meant to guard sacred tombs, ones full of gold and treasures. Gustus perked up at that. Other times they stalk about as vengeful things of wrath and death, brutally gutting and killing anything they see. They can even drive animals insane, turn the most tamed horses wild and frightened, turn docile hogs into glutinous beasts of wrath and greed, and turn birds into small worms that gut and feed on the entrails of smaller beasts, even peck the eyes out of the most skilled warriors. Really, they aren't to be taken lightly. They are powerful things of undeath. The only way you can kill it is to destroy the body. Dismemberment by itself won't work. The limbs will drag themselves back to each other and get minds of their own. I've heard the head is an optimal solution, but I've yet to see such proof. But what I know is definitive. He gave a pause for effect. The only way to kill them is to dismember and burn them before they can even possibly try to reassemble themselves and reanimate. They are nasty, wretched things of the Nordic lands I inhabit, and I doubt such is limited merely to there. The group was silent. Gunther sat in shock at such a detailed recount. So you think there was one stalking us from the tree line? Augustus asked, seemingly a bit skeptical. No. I do feel that such danger should never be considered obsolete, however. Many beasts lurk about the entirety of Midgard, whispered about by many and told under the firelight in company of others. A constant state of caution should be taken, even in safe havens. For that's where the worst incidents happen. Have you seen one? Albin asked, his words shaken. Ha! Oh, I have. When I served as a mercenary back home, I had to plunder a tomb with my group at the time. Only I made it out. He said the last part with a tinge of guilt. Everyone felt a sort of sympathy for Jorn at that declaration. Yet no one spoke, not even Finn, seemingly too shocked from the recounting. They were like that for a while before everyone seemingly returned to their usual busyness. Yet Albin still felt as if he was being watched by God's million eyes. And by something else's eyes. I really love the foreshadowing. This is very masterful, I think, in terms of pacing, in the sense that nothing that wild has happened yet, but there's been enough explanation of this world to make us think that something is coming, and this foreshadowing about what's watching them. We know the title is Where Mad Gods Dance, and we keep getting this allusion to God's eyes in the sky and something else's eyes. And so it's slow because it's giving us all the details we need to understand the world, but it's also enough to make us not want to stop reading. If I was reading this for fun, and this is for fun, but if I was reading this by myself off stream, I would like keep reading. I would be reading really fast because I want to figure out where this is going. This is really good. They left at dawn, mounting their horses in no sort of hurry, ready to continue to another day's travel. But they travel long. In fact, it was maybe an hour of it before Gunther who first saw something in the distance. "Oi, lads, I think I see a town up there." "Are you sure you're sober?" Augustus yelled back. "I am, you stupid arse." A wave of laughter roared across the group. Finally, Albin thought to himself. He watched as the town began to fade in from the fog. Slowly it seemed to disperse, as if to welcome them. Albin looked around and felt his eyes widen. That merchant knew what he was talking about. There were large houses fit for noble blood, elaborately decorated and well-kept, colored and vibrant, elaborately painted by the handiwork of a painter. Pompous men and women walked down polished cobble streets, waving to one another, all of which dressed in the finest of linens and wool, strangely colored compared to the dryness of the group's armor. Yet his awe came to a screeching halt when he heard a familiar sound. Ding, dong, ding, dong, ding, dong. A bell. Each ring sent a shiver throughout his entire being. He looked out to the distance, knowing what awaited him. A large church stood ever present amongst the shops, homes, and fog, so large it could see everyone and everything, including Albin. It saw through him, his being, his presence. It smelled the sin on his skin and the cinders of hellfire about his form. He shook his head, trying to ignore the prying feeling it gave him. He wasn't in the mood to relive what had occurred before, what drove him to his current living situation. He buried it within himself, attempting to drive it so deep in his soul it wouldn't bother him the whole time they were here. Yet he couldn't help but feel its fangs gnawing about his essence. The group stopped their horses, Finn looking for a spot to place them. He dismounted his horse and looked about till he saw a crowded building up ahead. "Jorn, could you join me in examining this place?" Jorn grunted in acceptance and dismounted his horse. Men and women still passed by what members of the group stayed behind. Some gave confused looks, others scowled. "Seems a little uptight here, don't it?" Gunther asked. "It's a place of nobles, Gunther. Of course it is. We're flea-ridden hounds in the den of golden felines," Albin said. "Don't they know we do work for them? What's it matter if we rub up a few brothels and drink them dry? We're dirty by our position. Best they get used to it." "Well, nobles don't exactly take kindly to the poorer members of society," Augustus interjected. So this is one of those things I was speaking of earlier, Plague. So like right here, this would be a period because the complete sentence was nobles don't exactly take kindly to the poorer members of society. So this would be a period, right? And then this would just be a capital letter, obviously. But if this was a fragment, right? So like if this was, well, nobles don't exactly, comma, Augustus interjected, then it would be a comma, and then it would be the rest, right? But like I said, that's a small thing that doesn't affect my reading, and I don't really think it matters. But some editors would be like, "Oh my god, like you got to do this," right? Especially around places like these. People around here are born nobles and knights, not dirt-encrusted mercenaries or disease-ridden barbarians. Even if we work for them, it doesn't cast around the inherent disdain they feel toward our kind. I say they ought to get some better manners. What happened to being respectful, classy, eh? Isn't that what they preach at the dinner table? It appears we aren't at a dinner table, Augustus said. No, in fact, we are on smelly mares. A great observation as usual, Augustus. And you call me an arse. The three chuckled at that. Albin couldn't help but feel a sort of warmth during moments like this. When the group and himself were enjoying one another's company in the moment, forsaking their surroundings and judging eyes, especially around Augustus, his presence made him want to melt in joy and euphoria, yet he found himself cursing at such a thought. No, damn it, he thought. That's not how I should feel. He's a sinful man, not a fair woman. It made his sense of joy dissipate like a puff of smoke, never to be seen again. Such feelings were the reason he was here, and the reason his back still seemed to sting. Yet he found his attention refocused when Finn hollered out, "Men, I found us a stable for the horses. Go on and get them locked up for the night." He watched as Gunther and Augustus proceeded forward. He felt his gaze linger that slightest bit on his friend. If only I could, he thought. If only I could. He shook his head and tugged at his horse's reins to move forward. All the while that church stared ever present, its watchful eye upon his form, for it saw his sins. A quiet set of adolescent children stood, singing a hymn of golden notes, blessed notes. The man sat in a pew next to a set of people who seemed to scoot away from his form. He hung his head low, holding his head in his hands, trying to take some sort of solace in this place. Yet, how could he? He'd been cast out before, and he surely deserved it again. How could he sit in the house of God with such penance spread across his back, paining him to sit straight? Then a sight caught his attention. From the corner of his eye was Father Abe. He looked up from his cracked, dirt-stained hands and could see his form behind the lectern, clad in robes sewn by holy hands, passed from preacher to preacher, pastor to pastor, priest to priest, a mark of a disciple, a mark of one blessed to spread God's word to all. His holy essence seemed to illuminate the chapel as he began to preach. Guilt. Within ourselves we find guilt. No one spoke. It was dead silent within the chapel. Not a sound rang out. We as a collective have felt guilt since the days of our fathers' fathers, our mothers' mothers, all because of sin. That word rang throughout the man's head, reverberating from one side to side within his skull as he proceeded that one singular term. It was like a ball of blades perpetually bouncing about, and it made his back sting more. He gritted his teeth. But I ask of thou all this. Are we truly doing this out of malpractice? Do we practice such sin with malevolence? Or is it accidental, caused by our nature to commit such acts? Eve did not know of sin till she committed its first act. She lived in ignorance before she ate of the tree of knowledge. She lived in bliss. In a way, we carry that in ourselves. We do sin every day, whether we know it or not. We sin because it's in our blood. To harbor such a guilt over what is natural is something we have all struggled with. I know for a select few it has had lasting effects upon thy soul and thy mind. We all know it can be forgiven. Unless it is of blasphemy, anything can be forgiven, for it is in our nature. The Lord is merciful, he is kind, and he loves us as his children. All thou needs to do is ask him for forgiveness, and I'm sure that we'll find it. I'm here to conduct such a thing. Through me the Lord can do such acts, for thou all he can and will be forgiven. Yeah, Republic, there is a Discord. I'm gonna link it right there if you haven't already seen it. And we all just kind of hang out in there. That's how I pick stories to read, is usually people just send one to me in the chat. But then we also give feedback to each other and just talk about writing or whatever. The man stared at Ab as he spoke, hanging on every word. Was he right? Could his desire be forgiven? But what of those who have made an example in his homeland? Those burned on piers of flame and branded for exile like him? Could they be forgiven? Would they be forgiven? He shook his head as the priest sat down and opened a book of hymns for him and all to sing. The brothel was warm and snug. A campfire burned within the mantel, and lantern light casted the place in a warm orange glow. A few servants walked about carrying drinks to tables, while a man stood behind the bar, wiping down glasses in the counter. Nobles chatted amongst themselves in quiet voices, either gossiping about others or the affairs of their roles, all of which was in contrast to the group of mercenaries sat in the back of the place. Jorn let out a hearty laugh as Finn recounted a story of a certain scandal he'd remembered in his court, Meanwhile, Gunther found himself enraptured within the taste of his drink and its contents. He stared at Jorn and Finn as they chatted, laughing along with them and staying quiet when they talked. Yet their companionship was nothing in comparison to his booze. If anything, it gave him a more stable shoulder to lean on than anyone else had. It was a sad thing, he knew, but it helped him forget them. As for Augustus and Albin, they themselves sat quietly and listened, giving a spare chuckle here and there with a few remarks when it was needed. Augustus found his fingers dancing across the wooden surface of the table as if in anticipation of something. Albin looked over to his companion and could begin to tell what was going through his head. Cards, peddling, tricking the noble-blooded into emptying their pockets into his. It was something they talked of on their way to the place, and now that they were here, Augustus was equivalent to a river bound for. One anticipating the moment a trumpet would blare and they could rip themselves from their watery binds, ready to bring about destruction on humanity, or in this case, the nobles' coin purses. What are you looking at? Augustus's voice cut through Albin's thoughts. He stumbled for words. Oh, nothing. I just noticed you seemed to be waiting on something. On what sort of thing? Perhaps a game. One of cards. Augustus gave a grin. However, it seemed to falter as he thought. What's wrong? I'm not even sure if they'll understand us. We're a bunch of people from Holy Rome, and they're from Franks. Sure, they'd speak some sort of German. Nobles do speak a lot of languages. That is true, especially in cases of diplomatic approach. You think one of the others might be able to translate in case? Surely Finn. I heard in Hibernia they speak some sort of Doyle. Could be your ticket, my friend. Seems so. The question is, who else is playing? Albin went a bit quiet at that. He wasn't sure. He knew he might, after all, admit more time with Augustus. But as for the rest of the group, they may or may not take up the idea. Finn would, with some convincing, and Jorn would be sure to follow. As for Gunther, it depended how drunk or immersed he was in his drink. The issue was that Augustus was a snake. It was a fact they all knew. Augustus was underhanded in how he played and wouldn't pass up an opportunity to feel the rush and excitement of a win, even against his comrades. Even if it went into their communal share, the others sometimes couldn't stomach an underhanded loss at times. Albin understood. He couldn't either at points. But even then, he always went back to playing against Augustus. It was as if he was in a realm of his own with him, a space shared between the two, with not a single soul there to peer in at their actions or thoughts. It filled Albin with ecstasy every time he did. There it was again. Those thoughts, those damn thoughts. He tried to reinforce it all over again, with the same reason. He was a sinful man, not a fair woman. But what did that thought do for him? Nothing. That's what it did. Nothing. He was as bad as the lustful king of Israel. A man of desire swooning after one he couldn't have, one not meant to be his. He was a sinner, a dirty, wretched heretic, one swathed within... Albin, what's wrong with you? Are you playing or not? Augustus's words made Albin almost fall out of his seat. He looked around at the table to see the concerned faces of his fellow comrades, all of which were looking at him. Oh, yeah, I am, he responded. You all right, my lad? Finn asked. Yeah, just got lost on my drink, I guess. Aren't you drinking water? Jorn asked. Albin looked down at his mug to a liquid clear as glass. Guess it's strong water, he rebuked. Wisen up, lad. If we want any sort of money, we need to be at our best, Gunther mused. I will. Just give me a moment. He grabbed his mug and walked toward the door, heading outside, feeling the eyes of his group piercing into his back like crossbow bolts. By then it seemed the sun had set. Time had passed quickly since their arrival. It was cold, oh so cold, as it usually was in autumn. He gave a sigh of relief as he leaned up against the wall of the brothel. No one was there to greet him, only the dark and his own thoughts. He stared into his mug, observing the way the water rippled about after his moving. It was dark out here, a cold abyss with no bottom in sight. He grimaced as he stared into it. He really couldn't change things, could he? Ever since his exile, it seemed it was impossible to. The pain in his back never did cease, even after it supposedly healed. Their vitriol and threats never left. None of it ever did. He thought he found some sort of reconciliation, but instead he found the same answer that always greeted him. Disapproval, even if minor. It was still there. If only he could change. If only, if only, if only. But it appeared that Satan's lusts and temptations had forever seared his blood, like he couldn't bring himself to think about it without feeling a burning in his eyes, and that oh so familiar pain. God, why couldn't he be different? Why couldn't he be obedient? Why did he act in the ways of God's traitorous angels? Why, just why? He felt himself crumble onto the ground, his back sliding against the wall with a stinging so great he cried out. He almost spilled the contents of his mug, only barely managing to keep it in his hands. Finally, as he reached the cold ground below, he put his legs up and laid his head in between them. He sat there for a long time, steeped in regret, steeped in sin, steeped within his desire. A child of God lost within his great manifestations and desires. But as he was thinking and deprecating himself, he heard a voice, one unlike a noble's, one more rough and dry. Are you all right there, sir? Albin looked up from his abyss of despair. Before him was a woman, about average height. She looked like she was from somewhere else entirely, not from Frank's. She spoke German, too, and her attire was one of a poorer social class, not one of nobility. Her clothes were not of luster, but of scraps and patchwork. Yet, it all seemed strangely elegant, as if all the pieces flowed together perfectly, in perfect harmony. Yet, yes, my apologies, ma'am. Something wrong? Albin didn't find himself able to respond. Instead, he stared into his mug, wondering if he should indulge the woman. He spun his finger in the water, making a small spiral within its darkness. It spiraled and spiraled deeper and deeper into nothing, till it all but faded away into a meekly disturbed surface. What's your business knowing? He asked, not taking his eyes from the water. It's my job, dear. After all, it seems like you're someone who needs help forgetting. Her words carried a certain accent of purring warmth and lustful comfort that made Albin shiver. I'm not sure what you mean, ma'am. His question was cut off. A night of indulgence to your liking, good sir. She gave a grin. Her adamance radiated off her skin like his sin. He looked her up and down. Maybe this was his proof. Maybe this was the evidence he needed in his mind. A night of courtship with a woman as fair as her, one without the thought of a man nor their sin. All but embrace, all that was intended, all that the Lord envisioned, from the early days of Eden to the modern monarchs. How much? He asked. Depends. What are you looking for? Don't care what it is. Just something to help, I suppose. She seemed to cock her head. Well now, shall we proceed? Albin looked down at the water again. I have something to finish. I'll meet you upstairs when it's over. He threw the water off his mug to his side, emptying it all upon the dirt. Very well, she cooed, before walking inside, closing the door behind her. Albin looked back at the ground. This is what you want. Courtship and a fair woman. Not him. He felt his hesitance, yet he pushed it down like stale alcohol. He turned his back to the ground, heading inside. Oh, I started clapping, but you can't see because my camera's broken. But man, this is really getting me hooked. Not just on the more potentially horror elements, but also just the relationships between the characters and Albin with these feelings that he's having, that he's trying to fight, and this kind of internalized homophobia that he's feeling towards himself. It's good. This is very, very good. As Albin found himself entering the bar, he saw a large congregation of men around a table, some of which his comrades. There you are, Albin. Come here and take a seat. Gunther's voice was loud and drunken. He'd already had too much to drink. Albin couldn't help but feel the slightest pity for him. He walked over to the table, seeing a few nobles and those of his caliber. Albin sat in his chair and watched intently as across from him sat what he tried to drown out. His sly figure tapping his fingers against the wood of the table, a charismatic gaze upon his face, eyes of firelight, dancing with desire much like his, yet for a non-living heart to which no soul truly belonged, shining bright trinkets that glittered and glistened within the firelight of wickers, much like the eyes of such men, men that, men that glittered within the sights of trinketry, and fell within the sea equivalent to their hoards. See, how could you lust after someone like him? He asked himself, further proof to himself that somehow he could push down such desire. Yet as he looked into his gilded and shining eyes, he saw such charisma that melted his soul, a feeling that made his blood run slow, and face burn like sin, red as Lucifer. Orgasmic it was, yet he found himself back within reality as he realized such things were not meant to be. He couldn't. No, he'd courted a fair woman of love and desire. How could he do the same for someone of a differing lust? His heart light in gold, while his desire lied within his grasp. Why couldn't he just accept what was? For David, he would not be. He couldn't be. Albin? He almost jumped at Augustus's words. Yet he kept some sort of composure amongst himself. Yes? Still here. Need you to focus? He tilted his head as if to motion for such a thing. Of course. Just got a lot on my mind, you know? Doesn't hurt to share. Albin shifted uncomfortably. He felt a bead of sweat on the side of his face, slowly dripping down, sending a cold chill across the course of his arteries and veins, culminating at the peak of his spine. I'm not sure if I should be. We're in company. The last bit was spoken quiet, as if a whimper. Something wrong? He couldn't produce any other words. His throat clogged with what could only be described as sharp stones. Augustus looked at him, a look of concern fracturing his composed face, his lust of luxury. "Un peu comme ça?" a noble spoke. His face was covered by a carcass of gray hair, as if he wore that of a rodent upon his face like a shield for his lower jaw. His voice was ragged and aged, a witness to many occasions, temperate and bitter. Augustus stared, confused at the man's speech. "He's asking if the game can begin soon," Vince said. "Tell him to shut his trap. Still gotta get the rules in order." "The mouth of an urchin is no use in such a place, Augustus. Neither is impatience. Where'd such manners go to die?" "That's what I said earlier, you bastard." Gunther's voice rang throughout the room. Augustus visibly eyed him from across the table. Gunther merely responded with a dumb grin before taking a swig of his drink. Finn gave a chuckle at the exchange. "El sera la dans un instant," he spoke. Augustus sighed and took a moment to collect himself, placing his hands upon the table and holding his head, trying to think of things. Technicalities, his tactics, the game, what was supposedly on the line with it. He let out a breath and opened a small leather pouch in his armor. He pulled from it a deck of waxy papers, about the size of a man's hand, a thick bunch of them, their backs an elaborate show of symbols and artistry, crookedly painted in some areas, while others seemed perfect. The mark of the artist, the mistaken work upon such a piece, such a thing branding it as imperfect, such a thing irreversible, unwashable, for all to witness, for all to see. Albin watched the cards be placed upon the wood of the table with a quiet thump. Then, the two steadily, sly hands of a man worked upon them, shuffling their cards in arrangement for the coming game. Finally, he finished, and with a single hand he picked up 7 cards and dropped each one across the table to a person. The 3 nobles watched, one in delight, the other in contempt, and the last in impatience, tapping their finger against the table, a smug look about them. As for the vagabond among them, they stared off into their own thoughts, while others preemptively watched to see the man's trickery or dirty work at hand. Albin himself couldn't help but watch, seeing the handiwork of his fellow man. Yet he urged himself to look away, to the fire within the room, its delicate embers. But he couldn't. Augustus did this rotation about 7 times, till each person had accumulated that number of waxy paper. Each person rushed to conceal their hand, the nobles slowed for the course, each taking their sweet time with such an act. Albin put his hand together and stacked them face down upon the table nearby, knowing of the explanation ahead. He watched as Augustus sat still at a statue before taking a deep intake of breath. "The game is called Deretzen. The rules are simple, but be the last one to still have a hand of cards by the end of the game. The dealer shall hand out a card with a number and symbol. If any of you have that card or number, you must hand in the card. As I said, the last one with the hand wins. Got it? Finn began to translate to the noble three amongst them, yet the smug one seemed to give a look of confusion. Est-ce un jeu pour enfants? He asked. Non, non. C'est entre simple. C'est le moment de jouer à un grand nombre de jeux en peu de temps, Finn responded. What's he asking, Finn? Augustus asked. He didn't answer. Instead, the nobleman began to speak once more. Que pour nous en a encore plus? Absolument pas. Nous avons peut-être la salle, mais nous ne sommes certainement pas dans notre. Finn looked concerned. Finn? Still no answer. Instead, the nobleman seemed to slump in his chair and give a gruff snort of air from his nostrils. Finn himself seemed a bit taken aback, yet a tinge of guilt had crossed his face. He knew Augustus. He knew his lust of trinketry and wealth from the day they met. It was, after all, how the two came across one another. Through deceit. Through ignorance. Augustus brushed off the look upon Finn's face in conversation, chalking it up to some sort of argument. He took his remaining deck of cards and pulled the first one off the top. He slapped the waxy paper onto the table. It depicted a man slyly carrying 4 swords with 2 plunged within the earth. 7 of swords, Augustus called. Everyone looked at their hands. Albin picked his up and finally took a good look at it. In his hand, he held a card depicting a man amongst a series of large branches, holding one like a walking stick. A card with a series of naked men and women standing in coffins, singing in praise of an angel playing the trumpet amongst the heavens. A card depicting an old man with a walking stick and lantern, standing aimlessly. His final one had an animal at each corner, and a wreath surrounding a naked woman in the sky. The cards perplexed Albin. They always had since Augustus and he had first played cards. Their artwork, so fine and trained, yet so imperfect. They were crafted elegantly and with a large surplus of time. It made Albin wonder where Augustus had gotten them. Their designs and supposed meanings were strange, yet he found it charming, similar to Augustus. Gunther grunted loudly. He handed Augustus a card, one depicting several goblets, each with an oddity within their rim, all of which surrounded by an air of clouds and a contemplating silhouette. Targeting me already, eh? Gunther snickered. Maybe so, Augustus said. Maybe so. One of the nobles scratched his head and bumped Finn's shoulder. Est-ce que ça entre? He asked. He presented the card to him. Albin couldn't see it right then, until Finn nodded as if to a child, and the man handed it to Augustus. He could make out a similar card to his, with a man seemingly disgruntled against the leer branches. That's it? Augustus asked. No one said anything except for Finn, who translated. Alrighty then. Augustus pulled out the next card. It gave the nobles a set of wide eyes upon its sight. On the card was a pagan thing, a monstrosity with the head of a ram, a humanoid body with the wings of a predatory bat, and talons of the mightiest hawk. On its head was a symbol of sin, a symbol Albin couldn't help but shift uncomfortably at. Below on its hand was a torch, with a naked pair, a man and woman. No, a pair of demonic imitators that stood chained to such a beast of pagan sin. The nobles blinked a few times before even beginning to search through their decks. The devil. Est-ce un sort de jupon? Qu'avez-vous apporté dans notre village saint? One of them asked in a tone of disgust. Augustus went completely silent. Non, ce n'est pas ce genre de choses. C'est juste une œuvre d'art. Destinée à représenter, Finn reasoned. They went silent at that, yet they gave a series of glares toward Augustus and the rest of the group as they sorted through their cars. Jorn, who'd been quiet up to that point, cleared his throat to get Augustus' attention. He handed over a card, one with a burning tower, with people falling off its peak. Something in Jorn's eyes concerned Albin a bit. He couldn't put his finger on it. Anxiety? Anger? Jorn was a stoic man, one who laughed, yet never showed his hand emotionally. But this time, something was different, even if subtle. Albin could see something moving about the orbs in Jorn's skull. One of the nobles plopped down a card upon the table and slid it to Augustus slowly and deliberately. It depicted a wizened, priestly man upon a throne with friars by his side, ready to take any order sent from heaven through him. Finn pulled a card from his hand and tossed it onto the table, as if to pull off a fanciful card trick. On it, an optimistic man stared off a cliff into the sky, prancing about merely, unaware of the danger below his feet. Albin finally looked down at his hand closely, seeing the one with the angel, the old man and wreathed women. He clenched his teeth as he handed them to Augustus. His chances of being the winner were looking slim. Augustus took the cards and put them amongst the discard pile before sorting through his deck once more. Finally, after a long moment of silence, he pulled out a card showing a hailstorm of branches. Branches Albin knew well. He looked down at his card before Augustus could even call the name. 8 of Wands, he said. Albin felt the claws of defeat dig themselves into shoulders as he stared at his now lone card. He gave a sigh as he handed Augustus his card. I'm out, he said. At least you can watch, Augustus responded. Not much in that course of action. Besides, I have someone waiting. Augustus raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? He asked. Albin felt his face begin to burn, his ears igniting like the coals of a meek forest flame. A woman, he said sheepishly. Ah, I was beginning to wonder if you'd ever do something of the sort, Gunther called. You and your good book made me think otherwise. Finn's eyes went wide at that, and he shot Gunther a look to keep quiet about that topic. You never gave that sort of feeling, you know, Augustus said. No, I don't. You just seem so doctrinated, I guess. Albin knew what he meant. Despite such a guilt he harbored, he still kept a copy of his lord's words among him, one he pried off the corpse of a wandering man, his bones but salt for birds of omen and death. Within its pages he'd been told of adultery. What happens to men who feasted upon such desire and craving before they ever got the chance to exchange such holy and sacred vows of bondage? He knew that, yet he hadn't considered it. Well, He felt his body begin to cool itself. He couldn't think of a rebuttal. Is that what you wanted to talk about? Augustus's words struck Albin like a nail through his head. Albin? Everyone was quiet. The noble stared on, confused at this, and one sat impatiently. His breath started to quicken. His chest began to hurt, each one shorter than the last. He felt his desire leaking through. He wanted so badly not to court a fair woman. He wanted the embrace of his fellow, injured, dirtied man, the love of intertwinement between the two within the comfort of sheets. And as he stared at Augustus, he so badly just wanted to tell him how he felt, who he truly was. But he couldn't. To do so was sin, blasphemy. All that came out was a combination of wrath, confusion, and stuntedness. Just forget about it, Albin yelled. He pushed out of his chair, the only sounds to accompany him being the wicker of flame within the hearth, and the clanking of his boots on the wooden floor. He made for the nearby staircase and ascended up, trying not to look at those he disregarded. The one he'd told off. The one he loved. Augustus began to get up, only for Jorn to speak. Don't. What do you mean, don't? There's something clearly wrong with him, Augustus shot back. He needs his release from us. What's the point in that, friend? Finn asked. He's clearly emotional at this moment over something. Let the wolf hunt before it makes a meeting with the pack. He's always been an isolated fellow, hasn't he? Gunther asked. Finn gave a face of regret. You're not wrong. Maybe it has something to do with us. I suppose we might not have given him the jolliest time. Make him feel like family. Jorn looked at Finn. In my homeland, those who love their fellow man are weak. Things of meek flesh and brittle bone. You did your best, Finn. He just needs time to himself. Best not to drown the mare in cloth. Augustus had sat down by this point and took Albin's card and looked at it. He narrowed his furrowing, his worn, snake-like brow. In the back of his mind, he had an idea of Albin's hunt, yet he was unsure if it was to be what he expected, for fateful hands only told so much. The conversation below had fizzled out into mute nothingness and mumbling when Albin had reached the hall that housed the brothel's rooms. It was an old thing, with the orchestrated cages of vermin and insect hunters hanging limply off the walls. Thick bouts of dust and dirt had acquainted themselves within the floor, leaving their light impression upon such a thing. Finn had reserved them a few rooms for that night's rest. The morrow they'd go about for work, yet to whom he did not know. He didn't care. His frustration, his sadness, all of it found itself coursing through the veins of his body, burning with the guilt, the madness, the authority of sin. That word. Albin hated it. That stupid word. How could such a simple three-letter word torture him? Yet he knew. He knew why it did. He knew why he and all the man's children deserved such a punishment. For they now lived outside of Eden and bore the knowledge of their forefathers' mistakes. It was then he saw the woman outside his room, waiting with a sort of impatience on her that melted when Albin appeared. He had almost forgotten why he was up here. That game of cards took a bit, huh? She asked. I suppose, Albin muttered. He looked her up and down then. You could have waited in the room. I'm not going to force you to stand out here. I don't know which room is yours, she said. He couldn't disagree with that. He looked about the hall, trying to recall which one Finn had said was theirs to encompass. Finally, he saw it. Room 7, with its numerals embroidered upon a plate that was nailed to the door. I gotta say, I'm really invested in this right now. If anyone has read Butcher's Crossing by John Williams, it sets up a very similar scenario. But I love that, like, literally since early in part 1, it's been kind of setting up what's about to happen right now, and his sexuality is about to come to kind of a battle with himself. So even though, like, this is a horror story, this is not horror, what's happening right now. But all the same, I'm so invested in it, and I want to know what happens. And that's how you write a good story. You give us gas station after gas station to kind of keep us, keep that fuel that keeps us engaged in the story, so you can take us wherever you want to take us. So he's getting us where he wants us to go, but he's adding little things to keep us invested all the way through. So it's very, very strong. I'm enjoying this a lot. And here, Albin said. He motioned for the woman to follow, to which she passed by him and opened the door. The room was as unkempt as the hall before. It was littered with dregs of dust and arched silk. It was barren of any sort of decor, only housing the essentials of a room. A plush bed with a red wool blanket draped over it awaited their union. After it rested a balcony, one that seemed to connect with the other rooms and gave a view of the night air through its slitted windows. Albin walked over to them and drew the shades, and went to lock the door with a key that hung loose from a nail. The woman laid herself upon the mattress and watched as Albin turned around. He looked at her. Her form. He contemplated a moment, wondering, thinking, could he do this? Was this what he wanted? No, dude, go get your man. Go get your man, bring him up there. Take him to fucking Funky Town. She cleared her throat. Are you going to stand there and look pretty? Or am I going to have to do the work for your coin? Albin shook his head. I'm sorry, it's just, I got a lot on my mind. Didn't seem to notice it herself. But a flash of concern struck her features, yet the woman rushed to hide them behind a veil of clientele. I do too, she said. But how about we forget about it for a bit, Albin sighed. Sure. And you're willing? She looked at him like he was stupid. Right, he said. He began to take off his plate, placing it amongst the floor gently, not trying to dent it. His sheath and shield amongst it, and a pile of clothes as he undressed into his shorts. He began to approach, and sat amongst the sheets, caressing the woman's face as he pulled in for a kiss. She reciprocated, answering with her own. Yet it lacked. All of it did. The force of it, passionless, emotionless. It just wasn't Augustus, with his massive... Just kidding. You want this, Albin thought. This is it, not him. He put his hands behind her shirt, slowly snaking about her skinny, bony back, removing it, revealing her fair skin, radiant, glowing. He felt nothing. Her arms slowly began to move about onto his back, grasping for support. What she felt was the usual, intending to strip what garments he had left below. He fell forward onto her, unable to drive himself into any sort of remote pleasure. He kissed and kissed her. She answered back each time. However, her hands began to snake farther and farther among his back. He ignored it, focusing on her naked chest, her shape, trying to find something, just something. Her hands found the lower part of his left side. She reached for his shorts, yet all she found was a scar, a flaming, pulsing scar. Albin kicked back in pain, struggling to remove himself as his mark burned. She relented, watching as Albin fell off the bed in a mess of sheets and blankets onto the hard floor with a loud slam. She looked down at Albin as he struggled to get up, grunting in pain. "Are you all right?" Her mask slipped. Yes, he managed to choke out. His breath was heavy. He tried to process what was occurring. The pain was immense, burning and scalding, still fresh upon his back as the day it had been placed. He gritted his teeth, trying to find something to cling, just to stop the pain. The woman watched from the bed, confused, concerned, and unaware. Albin began to feel the pain sizzle out as if the remains of a hearth. He couldn't face her. His embarrassment immense, his pride broken, his mark revealed to her as he turned, and she covered her mouth in shock. His skin was still seemingly red, yet it had dulled. But the flesh was tender, soft, and barely scared. It's crazy that Funky Town is playing this entire time that this is happening, and the song was invented for like 200 years. Yet it was not the mark of a man, a blade, or an arrow shaft, but the mark of the beast burnt upon his back. Ram's face depicted on his harsh, broken skin, a mark of his sin, a mark of religious heresy, a mark placed upon those of a loving man, heretics swathed in desire. The woman couldn't find any sort of words. She stared in shock at Albin as he sat upon the ground in the position of those unborn, unbaptized, unknowing of sin. She covered her chest with the sheets remaining amongst the bed, as if someone were to walk in on their intercourse, and tried to find something, anything to say. "Sir," she managed to squeak out. Albin didn't respond. He lay in shock, all of it crashing upon him. Augustus, his temper, his sin, his loving intercourse that branded him as such evil man within the eyes of his church, his actions to avoid it, his worship of desire, of lust. What did it bring? What did it? What did it? "Sir!" Her voice brought him back to reality, yet reeling and wounded. He looked over to see the woman's concerned face, one of true emotion, one without a mask to cover her indifference, but human concern. "I'm all right, just... You're clearly not, sir. What has hurt you so bad to revert to such a state?" Her words cut through his like a mercenary's blade. He grimaced, debating whether or not to tell her. "I won't tell a soul. I swear upon it. Even then you don't have to tell it all. Just, how can I comfort you? How can I make you forget it all?" Albin thought for a moment, trying to think of what to even start with, if he should even speak of such things locked under such tight chains, under it all, under everything. "I can't do this," he said. "What do you mean?" she asked. I'm not a man of such things. I don't fondle the look and feel of a woman. I don't caress such things. I don't like women in such a manner." Oh my god, this is crazy. The woman looked stunned for a moment before she shook her head. "Then why did you go through with this?" "Because I thought it was what I was supposed to want. But nay, I can't. It's not the thing I crave, what I lust for. What I love is my fellow man's embrace, yet I can't do that." "Why not? I don't see an issue with it." Oh. Albin was taken aback. "Huh?" he stuttered out. "Are you religious?" "Indeed so. Such things, I don't think you should allow such things to dictate what you love. But it's God's law. I can't just... I can't... But you can. Do you think I care about such things?" Albin looked her up and down. "No," he said, confused. "I don't. I couldn't care less. God didn't do anything for me by putting me in my position. Why should I care what he thinks?" "Because he's our creator." "But does the creator control the created? Do your mother and father dictate your destiny? Did they tell you to become a mercenary?" "No." "Exactly. Because that was your choice. Even if it was sinful in some manner, it was your choice. Life is your own to walk, not another's to run." Albin sat silently for a moment. "You know a lot, huh?" "I do. After being a morsel for another's warmth and desire, you tend to understand people. What makes them tick. Do you do it by choice?" She went silent at that. "I do it to get by, for your information. Nobles pay well here, for an affair or a night's pleasure. I hope to leave this place, find a better life, and settle down by myself." "Without a lover?" She chuckled at that. "Seeing how it all works really disheartens you." "I guess so." "Tell me, Is there someone you love? Cherish? Albin didn't need to think. He knew who to say. Augustus. He's my friend. I just don't know how to even talk about that with him. He's so amazing. He's funny. He's sly. He's really caring when you get to know him. He's a great writer. He's a great friend. But what would he think? What would the others think? Who cares, the woman said. Are they your friends if they can't tolerate you, especially for such emotions? I wonder if they consider me as such. I'm more distant with them than anything. I can tell you, they probably care. Mercenaries are brothers in arms. Family. You just need to be open with them. I guess so, Albin said. The sound of distant cheers and footsteps below shook Albin to his core. I guess you'd be best to join them, she said. I never did get your name, Albin said. Eden, and you. Albin, I'll be seeing you, I suppose. The noise emerged from Eden's mouth. Those of Sodom have to pay. She gave a sly grin. Albin gave a faint chuckle and ruffled about his clothes for his coin purse. Finally he found it and poured all of its contents into his hand, then presented it to Eden. Take it, Albin said. You need it more than I do. I have a group to support me, like you said. Eden gave a smile and took the money. Safe travels, and if your friends need to stay, I'll be about the place. Understood, Albin said, putting on his clothes. He decided to leave his armor in the room. He didn't need it now. There was nothing to defend against. He left the room, allowing Eden time to leave it as well before walking down the hall. Only to see a room door open. One on the same side as his. He walked about to it, not trying to be nosy, yet his curiosity led him to see why such a place was exposed. He gave a small gaze into the open space, finding a room nearly identical to his, with bits of armor scattered about, a bag and coin purse thrown on the bed, and the same type of door to the same balcony. Albin gazed at the bag for only a moment, knowing who it belonged to. He'd seen it a multitude of times amongst the belt of a sly thief, a thief that stole his heart. He walked into the room, wondering where Augustus was. It was then he saw his silhouette amongst the dark outside, staring at the stars above, illuminated by the faintest lamplight. Albin approached and peered through the door to it. He saw his form amongst the darkened sky, his slim body, his charismatic gaze, his gentle features, so subtle yet so strong. He looked out longingly at the stars above, their forms about 1,000 scattered as if recently slew blood. He debated to himself walking outside then. Conversation with him. How would it go after his mishap? Would he forgive him? Would he allow his behavior to slide as he did amongst city streets? But he thought of Eden's words. He took a deep breath and hoped she was right. He stepped through the door. Its creaking made Albin cringe. Yet, he persisted. Through it, he found him, and a shocked look about him. Ah, I suppose your encounter was quick, yeah? He asked. You could put it that way, Albin said. He walked up next to Augustus, looking out at the sky above, a desolate, star-filled abyss. He put his hand on the railing, close to Augustus. How was the card game? Fine enough. Jorn was actually the one to win it for us. Really? You didn't pull anything? Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. His smile was as sly as ever, and it made Albin feel warm inside, about his body, about his mind, all over. You know, we actually learned something from one of those nobles, Augustus said. Pray tell. Told us the father of the nearby church is looking for some workers. Said he has an important task in store for us. All the warmth disappeared from Albin's body. He froze in place as he had before. The smells of burning wicks and incense were yet to leave him. And that bell, that damn bell. Its song, one of divinity, one of honor, one of purity. Pure he was not. What was it you needed to speak about anyways? Albin finally took in Augustus's expression, one of concern, one of anticipation. He knew once it was said, it would not be untold, for such things remained about the air as did quiet hymns. He had to confess, much as he did before this point in time. I can trust you, right? He asked. Augustus looked taken aback. Of course, I might be a thief, but I'm no prattling maiden of gossip. He looked into Albin's eyes. I think it's finally time I tell you this, Augustus. Albin clutched his hands on the railing. This was it. His moment to speak, his moment to finally say it. What had eaten at him like a wickering flame? What had torn him asunder and melted his form as if paper on mere wax? Who he was. I'm not as pure a man as you think. We're all impure, Albin. Whatever you have to say is most likely tame in comparison to such escapades. I'm not a quarter of woman, Augustus. I'm... Augustus looked confused and nervous. Come on, just say it. He had to. He couldn't let this moment pass, this moment of isolation under the obscure light of Lucifer's moon in contrast to God's blisteringly known sun, and the light of sin. Embrace it, he thought. Embrace it as Eden. Embrace it as a courted woman. I court those of our kin, Augustus. Men, not the proper, loving women of gods. No, I'm a heretic swathed within my desire for you, for thine scent, for thine form, for thine air, for thine breath, for thine sin. The words tumbled out as if fallen demons from heaven. Augustus was quiet. He looked not at Albin, but at the stars. He seemingly contemplated. I'm sorry. Shouldn't have spoke. I... Don't. Albin stopped speaking at that. He stared confused at Augustus. Don't apologize, Albin. But you don't seem to reciprocate such feelings. Maybe I do, Albin. Maybe I don't. Albin felt a strength of warmth across the stretch of his form. He tensed at it. His mouth seemingly hung agape. You mean it? In a way, I suppose. Or as a companion, a comrade to my trickery and mischief, a counter to your morals. In fact, I'm surprised someone of your liking would express such a thing. Why so? Augustus was solemn. When I snook about the streets of cities years ago, I saw men broken and humiliated for all to witness for their crimes against God, never daring to express such things, let alone touch those thoughts, lest a pitchfork spring out from that well. I guess it has been a long time coming to express it. I just needed a push. He waved an arm back to where his room's door was. Not just that, Augustus said. When our band stumbled upon you, you were but rags of soil and burnt by virtue. A man lost amongst a greater world at war, with scorned apprehension to their guiding light, but a blind moth scarred by wickers. Both were quiet, taking not another move, instead keeping to their previous positions, as if a game of sin and virtue in one's mind. Finally, Albin spoke. Do you truly have that sort of courtship with me? Or am I, as you said, a comrade? Depends what game we're playing, Albin. One of fate, or one of rebellion. I care not for what those above us think, not what our group thinks, not what anyone thinks. But like the prospect of trickery, there's the recourse of others. I don't feel that there's a chiseled path for us amongst this grand tapestry of stone, but the chisel lays near. Either we shatter, or we stand the course. Augustus finally turned, and within the dimness of the lighting, Albin thought he could see the slightest bit of red amongst Augustus's face. The question is, what game are we playing, Albin? He didn't know how to respond. I'm unsure, but I feel this tapestry of silk and chips can be laid out and strategized for a stretch of time. Either you or I make the first move. It depends on how you're thinking when it comes time to make your mark. Augustus gave a chuckle. You are a charmer, I will admit. 'Tis the same with thou, Albin responded. Augustus began to lean over toward him. To what ends he knew, but he found himself straightened quickly, as if normal upon the sound of footsteps upon the balcony. Albin looked over his shoulder behind him, seeing the familiar outline of Gunther walking about the balcony, a drunken and distant sway about him. He seemed to pay no mind to the two as he stared out into the dark. Albin turned back to Augustus. What's his plight? You can never really tell with him. He's not the most open of us. I figured. Most of you were quite vague. Am I wrong? No. But occasionally the time comes to give in to confinement. Yet Gunther never has. Finn gladly will. And Jorn's strange about it. How does he manage? Albin already knew the answer. It was an obvious one, and it hurt him to think about it. Drink, women, really anything distracting works. He doesn't confront his problems, Albin. He runs from them. Have I not done the same? Augustus stared contemplatively. I suppose you do, yes. In fact, I can't remember a time before this when you've actually opened up. You and him are always so distant. Can that change? With time and action, it could. But such things await a new morrow. After all, there's plenty of days for us ahead. Ones of strife, ones of labor. Tomorrow. Tomorrow may be if our bets are of true value. Wise words from a thief. And such ignorance from a holy man. The two gave a laugh at that, a brief respite that went up in smoke when they remembered Gunther stood about nearby, lost in his consumption, with only the guiding light of shining brew there to greet his every waking day. A poor and sorrowful realization that Albin never truly considered. For as himself, others of his manly kin suffered, and he never batted an eye, until such was pointed to him. It was not just that pierced him. He thought of his conversation, his close sin, and cursed himself with the temple of his mind. How could he dare to almost lay lips with a man again, after the supposedly rightful punishment he'd been dealt? How could he? How could he and Gunther continue on in knowledge of themselves, of their sins, of their lusts, of their hierarchy, placing others above their creator? How could they? As all his thoughts began to wash away in a grand, disastrous flood, he remembered Eden. A temptress she was, that's all she was. A means of alluring him to a darker version of himself, a character of himself that's only thought of his lust, of only his most deep, dark, and boiling sins as a normal recourse. Eden, such a name was but the devil's plague amongst him, tempting him with a false hope, for the garden was gone, its bright, amazing flora and living beings wiped away, and a clean state only survived by those of holy nature and faith of their God. How could he embrace such a temptress, such a succubus? How could he? It was only then Albin had realized Augustus had gone. Alongside him went Gunther, for he stood amongst the balcony above, his sins ever boring their painful spines within his back flesh. He looked up at the sky as he had before, a million eyes watching, only hidden behind dark specters of clouds. God probably was looking away in disgust and disappointment at such a nearly horrid act, at such submission to sin. Rightfully so, he left, for he could never win this game, even with a favorable dealer and a merciful opponent, for his fate left him the first to withdraw and the last to forget. He never dreamed often, the man. He went night upon night, merely emerging from his timed slumber without a vision within his nightly shelter. Yet, as he lay amongst the sheets of that old, dusty bed, he dreamt. It was as if he was transported outside reality itself, all of it a vague echo of mist and dust behind him as he opened his eyes in a foreign land. At least, that's what he thought. What hit first was the cold. Everything around him was freezing, harshly so. He felt his teeth begin to chatter, yet he snapped them shut tightly. He clenched his fists as he looked about where he was, readying, fortifying himself. Yet all he saw was a freezing mist in front of him that stretched on into a white void. He looked at the ground below. It was but dry earth, cold and unfeeling, with the remains of some sort of plant scattered about it in rows. A field, one brought to its end by something outside itself. Supposedly not the farmer, no, but by another hand, by the hand of fate. Something uncontrollable. He knew it was, and within his mind he felt himself begin to panic. His body was shaking, not just from the cold, but the panic within his soul. He looked about, and, frantically, with all his might and will, he took his panic and forced it down like stale alcohol in his throat, all of it igniting in a fury unseen when he was awake, unless in the heat of battle. He rushed through the mist, hoping to find his escape somewhere, anywhere. He kept running and running, his feet running over the remains and stalks of plants, once shining wheat, brought to a dull, dying gray by the hand tied by the world's strings. Running and running is all he did, seemingly for hours. He wandered this strange place, feeling for an escape, searching endlessly for something, anything, yet there was none to be found. He felt his breath begin to catch in his throat as he ran, the exhaustion and cold mixing and bringing him to his knees as he sank amongst the dead. He lay down upon his back, out of breath, his might exhausted, all of it used, and for what? All of it was out of his control. What was the point of trying to fight it, trying to fight fate? He did not know. Yet he fought, tooth and nail, to keep fate out of his life, to keep it from taking away everything he had left. The comrades and men, as he wondered about the expanse of the world they knew, side by side, brothers in arms. But such a fight he knew very well be unwinnable. He He gave a small, meek chuckle at that. All of it was an effort, unlike that of a boulder-pushing man he'd heard the story of during his many jobs over the past decades. Yes, he remembered it well. A man slaving away, endlessly toiling against the inevitable. He tried to fight death, escape a river Styx, but that fight was inescapable. Such was the same as his punishment. Forever locked upon a hill, pushing an impossible weight to its hill, only for it to grow too heavy upon his back, impossible for any man to ever carry. Not even God's. So he'd try again and again, all of it a futile effort. Was that to end the same for him? Was he too supposed to lay down his life over and over again for those he cared for? Or was he to break that cycle? These thoughts were broken upon the sound of clopping hooves. He looked up. Right in front of him on the ground, in the distance, was a dark shade, one he knew well. Oh, so well. He remembered where he was now. A place he'd been before in warning of a disaster. Once he'd seen before an ultimate cleansing of those he held, those of his kin, former comrades. He'd seen it again and again, and he stood to face it. What sense was there to lay down, when fate seemed to be calling his name once more, to mock him with his efforts? No, he'd beat fate to a bloody pulp for such indiscretion. Closer and closer the shade came, its form recognizable to him. In fact, he'd rode many of his breaths before, some feral, others tamed, some adapt to the latter with the time and care. Others rejected the latter, and embraced their primality, what truly made their hearts beat, a mare. Not just a mare. A black-colored mare, one with a long and a tangled mess of a mane, greasy and hanging on one side as if to cover its face, its true visage, its true nature. Its fur was slick and unnatural, and he knew damn well why. For when he saw it, flies and insects seemed to accompany, even in the rotted carcass of this cold landscape. For it too was a rotted carcass, hiding its primal innards behind a mane of hair. The smell, it finally hit him. One rot, one of incense, one of some sort of orthodox place mixed with a rotting body. It finally came face to face with him after a minute. It stood mere feet away from the man. He clenched his fists as he stared at it. It snorted at him with its rotted nose, its breath invisible in the crystalline air. He didn't move. He stared at the thing. His face was stern and cold. "What news do you bring me now, you horrid thing?" It did not speak. Instead, it gave an approach, close enough to be close to touching the man's face with its towering figure. He could smell the rot of it, hear the maggots eternally crawling about its flesh. It shook its mane to its cleanlier side of its face, one meant to be seen, and turned it to the man. The sight never dulled to the man, despite his brutish features. A sight of nightmares. Oh, oh my god, holy shit. I'm loving this. I'm living for this right now. So I did not expect the direction this story took, where it seemed to be centered on this relationship with Augustus. I wanted so bad for them to, like, I don't read romance. I never read romance. And I'm not saying that this is just a romance story. I never get invested in any kind of romance in anything I read. But this story was really doing it for me, and I was so invested, and I so badly wanted to see them get together, and I hope they do as the story continues. It's kind of like a forbidden love type thing, but then we get this rotting horse that's showing up at the end. So something's going on. I think this is a perfect place to end off, because I want to read more. I genuinely, like, I want to go read part 3, part 4, part 5. And I think I will as soon as I have time. I think this is a perfect place to end, though, because I imagine everyone is enjoying this as I am. And so if you want to read the rest, I'm going to put this in the chat. You can go that. You can go there. He has a link to part 3 in the comments, and you can go read the rest right there. Amazing story. I want to see them get together. Yeah, would I want to see them, like, not get, like, did you not want to see them get together? I'm not saying I want to watch them have sex, but I want to see them be happy and get together, and I don't know. I think they're a good couple. It's like there's so much going on in this story. It's such a full story. It's so deep, and so deep, like he's gonna be in Augustus, like Albin will be in Augustus, so deep. um it's such like a deep story, so much going on. The prose is beautiful. I think you have really strong sentences, and it really helps with getting us through the story. um yeah, take him to Funky Town. That was great. I could honestly harp about how much I loved that for even longer. But I want you to know, like, you're a good writer, man. I really, really enjoyed that. I can't wait to read the rest of it later on. Um, that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and get going to the next story because it's almost 9, and I was planning to be done at 9. So we'll go a little bit over. Just gonna leave it like that. But no, good job, man. I never thought I would get, like, usually you don't get invested in characters in a story on Reddit that's horror, but you have like a natural talent for writing the characters. The sentences are nice. You do a great job with the world building and keeping true to the time of the story. The setting is strong. Um, I'm excited to see where that goes. I hope you have plans for making it into like a book, whether that's a novel or a novella. I enjoyed it a lot. So let's go ahead and read this next one. This is actually not going to be a horror story. This is fantasy, and I have no idea what to expect going in. But this is by suspicious underscore fact 5106. I'm going to paste a link in here. Otherwise known as Jake. Suspicious Fact is otherwise known as Jake. Feel free to go and give this and the last story an upvote so it gets some more traction. I mean, it's 6 months, but you know, might as well get him that extra karma. But yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes. The Apprentice and the Corpse. My arms tightened as I pulled the chain attached to the body behind me. My dead master, life gone but body very much still intact, left trails in the black sand as his limp form slid along the ashy wasteland. Try as I might, I just can't seem to be rid of him. The task of destroying everything he was wouldn't even be so bad if he would just stop talking. You son of a whore, his limp corpse called from behind through unmoving lips. Ooh, I'm loving this already. Destroying, so his dead... He's trying to get rid of his master's dead body. He's like, but he just won't fucking stop talking. That's crazy. That is fun. I can see now that he wasn't lying when he said he'd achieved immortality. Problem was, he should have also made sure his soul couldn't be stolen. See, what I did was promise his soul to a not small selection of evil creatures and ancient beings. They all ripped their pieces from him, leaving his body behind. I smiled as I watched him writhe in agony, his very essence torn to shreds. He deserved far worse for what he did, torturing me day after day. It's for your own good, he'd say. I don't see how burns and bruises could help anyone. I left his broken body on the floor of his dungeon for a few days, amongst his many jars of souls, magical artifacts, and deadly poisons. I chuckled to myself every time I passed by. He used to lock me in there for weeks, to further my training in dark magic. Now it could rot in there. Except he didn't rot. His body continued to stay in the same pristine condition it always was. I tried burning it first. I eventually had to put out the flames after 3 days. I attempted to hack it to bits, but every time the blade went into the body, it would cut clean through without anything breaking off. I even tried throwing it off a cliff. When it got to the bottom, the body was still whole. Not even a scratch on it. So, I just tossed it back into the dungeon. Then it started to speak. Simple phrases at first. I thought I was imagining it, the ghosts of my past coming back to haunt me. I threw the body back into the dungeon and locked the door, but I could still hear it, moaning down in the darkness. After 5 days, I finally went back down. It was dark and musty. The body was right where I left it. What took you so long? It said. I didn't reply. I still thought I was crazy. Speak when spoken to, boy. That snapped me back. I killed you. You're supposed to be dead, I stammered, now wondering if I really had. Yeah, well, you did a piss poor job of that, just like with everything you do. The whole time, the body hadn't even moved, not even a twitch, but it was still talking to me like my master would, like he had never left. I don't serve you anymore. I'm my own master now. The body howled in motionless laughter. Boy, you serve me as long as I say. I continued to laugh. I turned around and closed the door. Wait, wait. I heard the corpse's muffled cries behind me. I smirked at the sound. I might not have gotten fully rid of the Master Warlock yet, but he couldn't just order me around anymore. I waited a couple minutes to let the corpse stew in my absence before walking back in. What do you want? I demanded. It stopped screaming for a moment, then spoke. Get rid of this body. Completely. I blinked. If I could have done that, I would have already. Yes, I know. You tried all sorts of ways to dispose of me, the corpse responded. This vessel is too powerful to be destroyed by conventional means. You have to chuck me in the hottest pits of Verkle. Verkle, the land of flames, a place wreathed in fire and home to Mount Destro, the peak where he wanted me to take and throw his body into the lava pits below. Unfortunately for me, that was exactly what I wanted. So I obeyed the master I had so desperately tried to break free from. Oh, that is tough. That's really tough. I like that. I like the little situation he's in. It's like, I do not want to listen to this master anymore, but we want the same thing. So I'm still following his orders, even when he's dead, and I hate him. I dragged it through forests and cities and caves and mountains, across oceans and countries. I met many people, saw many things, the corpse nagging me all the way. It was a great conversation starter whenever I was in town. Got in trouble with the authorities a few times. But once it started talking, they'd let me go. Had to save it from a bear that tried to run off with it. The dead body was screaming in pain the whole time as the bear made it his chew toy. I was tempted to let him have it. We went through many adventures, the corpse and I, and, finally, we made it to Verkle. My arms were sore, my legs were weak, but I was almost done. Just had to get to the top of this tall, tall mountain. Hurry up, it called from behind me. I ignored it and kept climbing. Soon I'd be rid of my master for good. This one last task of fitting into our long and arduous relationship. Why do you want to die anyway? I asked as I wrested his body loose from a few rocks jutting out of the mountainside. You idiot, it shot back. I'm dead already. This body's just holding the last scrap of my essence tethered to this world. Every moment is agony. I grunted and pulled. I could see the top, the rim of the volcano that looked down into the fiery pools below. So, you just want whatever's left of your soul to be free. Finally go to hell where you belong. The corpse chuckled. Not going to hell, boy. No. I've got another vessel waiting for me. I stopped. My heart skipped a beat. Another vessel? What do you mean? It continued to laugh, low and menacing. Come on, boy. I know you're dumb, but you've got to be smarter than that. I gulped. What little moisture I had left in my throat sinking down into the pit of my stomach. It's you, boy. I dropped the chain, mere feet from the edge. All this time. Yes, it continued. I've been priming you, boy, and you've been carrying me here so I could shed this form and take over yours. My hands trembled. You're gonna do it too, it taunted. You're weak. You can't do anything yourself. You know you can't cross me, even knowing that dropping me in is the same as jumping in yourself. The corpse laughed again, his twisted joy filling my ears as I stood there. I always had a feeling he wasn't going to go down quietly like that. I made you, he bellowed, his glee coming to an abrupt end. Now drop me in. Oh my god. I really am loving this, and it's kind of like this idea that when we have the opportunity to break away from abusive relationships, how do we get the strength to do it? Can we do it? Or do we fall back in? And I want to see this guy get out of this. I want to see him escape this relationship. Now drop me in. I did. Well, fuck. I kicked him down and watched as his body fell into the lava. His body sunk into the molten rock, a ghostly blue erupting from within his chest. It was him, his spirit rising from below to me. I only had one shot. You see, he had made me. He made me into someone that can do what he does, think like he thinks. I figured he would try to steal my body if he could. It's what I would do if I were him. So, I came prepared. Right before his smiling form reached me, I pulled out an empty soul jar from inside my coat. His face twisted into a scowl, then a scream as his essence was sucked inside. He couldn't do anything to stop it. His soul now trapped inside. I smiled, watching his face scream in a soundless fury. I tucked it back into my coat and turned back down the mountain. Finally, I was free. Yay! Yay. I love that. I'm really happy about that ending. I was worried that it was gonna, because I saw that it was wrapping up soon, and I was like, I really hope this motherfucker doesn't just let this asshole take his body. I love this a lot. It's like he such creative. I'm always impressed. Every time I read something from Jake, I'm impressed. I'm so impressed by his creativity. I really, really enjoyed that one. Um, and I like that he made us think that he was going to fall back into that abusive relationship and not be able to break free. And there was that moment where he he was able to do it. He was able to make it happen.